When Helen Grison picked up the phone and heard her sister's voice, sweet as poison, she knew it was starting all over again. "Hey, sis," Lorraine chirped. "Just wanted to remind you, Dad's house is mine now. And if you think you're getting a single cent after his funeral, well, think again." Helen didn't reply. She simply hung up, exhaled slowly, and stared at the photograph on her dresser, her father in his armchair, coffee in hand, smiling as if he knew his death would ignite a war. A war he himself had started. For 30 years, Helen had given everything: time, money, peace of mind for her family. She worked as a nurse at the hospital, yet every weekend she drove an hour to her father's old house on the outskirts of Portland. She fed him, cleaned for him, did his laundry, and listened to the same old war stories, the same nostalgic rants about how things used to be better, and rants about those new neighbors who don't even know how to cook corn properly. She endured it because he was her father, because her mother had left too soon, and because Lorraine, her younger sister, was too busy to waste time on that stubborn old man. Lorraine lived in Miami, with a husband, 2 kids, and a beauty salon that earned her more in a month than Helen made in 2 years. And all this time, she visited once a year at Christmas, bearing gifts, a smile, and a litany of excuses. "I'd help if I could, honestly. But I've got so much on my plate, you understand, right?" Helen understood. She understood far too well. But everything changed 3 months before their father died. He called her one night, voice trembling. "Lorraine, she made me sign some papers. Said it was to make things easier after I'm gone. I didn't read them. I trusted her." Helen arrived the next day. The house smelled of lavender and fear. Her father sat by the window, hunched over, as if betrayal, not illness, had broken him. "She said that you were too tired. That you needed a break. That I was her responsibility now." Helen didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just called a lawyer. But it was too late. The documents were in order. Her father had legally gifted the house to Lorraine, reserving only a lifetime right to live there. After his death, everything would pass to her. He was of sound mind, the lawyer said flatly. "Signatures are valid. There's nothing we can do." Helen drove away in silence, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. She didn't tell her father the truth. She didn't want him to die drowning in guilt. She just kissed his forehead and whispered, "It'll be okay, Dad. I'm always here." But her eyes were already burning. The funeral was quiet. Rain poured from the sky. Lorraine arrived in a dark coat and sunglasses, despite the overcast sky. She hugged Helen as if nothing had happened and whispered, "Don't be mad, sis. I just knew better what Dad needed in his final months. You were exhausted. Everything has its limits." Helen smiled. Politely. Coldly. "You're right, Lorraine. Everything has its limits." The next day, Helen didn't go to work. She quit. After 28 years at the hospital, she'd saved a modest amount, not a fortune, but enough for a few months. She rented an apartment close to her father's house, now Lorraine's, and began to watch. Lorraine flew in a week later, bringing her husband and kids. They threw a family week in the house she now called Our Family Legacy. The kids drew on the walls, her husband grilled burgers in the backyard, and Lorraine strolled through the rooms like a queen, snapping Instagram photos, the Grison family heritage. A new beginning, sparkling heart. Helen sat in her car across the street, jotting everything down in a notebook, not out of rage, but calculation. She knew Lorraine wouldn't keep the house long term. Too valuable to abandon, yet too inconvenient to live in Miami, her business, the kids' school. So it would be rented out, or left empty. And that made it vulnerable. Helen wasn't foolish. She didn't smash windows or set the lawn on fire. Her revenge had to be subtle, legal, and excruciating. She started with the land. The house sat on a plot their mother had inherited from her own parents. Though the house was legally Lorraine's now, the property boundaries had never been officially surveyed. Their mother had never bothered. "We just lived how we lived." But Helen remembered every pine tree, every stone. She hired a surveyor, spending her last savings. And it turned out, The true boundary ran 3 feet inside Lorraine's claimed lot. And right on those 3 feet stood the garage, meaning Lorraine's garage was illegal. Helen filed a lawsuit not against her sister, but against the city. She claimed the building permit had been issued with erroneous boundary data and demanded an official reassessment. Until then, the structure was deemed an illegal encroachment. The court, slowly but surely, sided with her. The garage had to be demolished at Lorraine's expense. "You've lost your mind," Lorraine screamed over the phone. "That was Dad's garage. You painted it yourself." "It wasn't my garage," Helen replied calmly. "And it wasn't yours. That land belonged to Mom. And you didn't even know where her grave is." Lorraine fell silent. But that was only the beginning. Helen knew the house needed repairs. The roof leaked, the wiring was ancient, the boiler barely functioned. Of course, Lorraine didn't invest. She listed it on Airbnb instead. "Classic American home with history," she wrote in the listing. The first guests arrived 2 weeks later. 3 days in, they called an ambulance, carbon monoxide leak. No one was hurt, but police filed a report, safety violations. Fine issued. Airbnb license suspended for a month. Helen hadn't touched the boiler. She'd simply never told Lorraine that their father had asked her to call a technician a month earlier, but she'd put it off. In his notebook, he'd written, "Helen, the boiler sounds strange." Helen photographed the page and sent it to Lorraine with a note, "Maybe check before renting again." Lorraine didn't reply. The third blow was the subtlest. Helen found old letters in hospital archives. Their mother had died of ovarian cancer. But the diagnosis came too late because 20-year-old Lorraine had convinced her not to get tested. "Mom, don't overthink it. It's just stress. You're just tired." Their mother listened. She died 4 months later. Helen kept copies of the medical records and a letter their mother had written a week before her death. "Lorraine says I'm being dramatic, but I'm scared. Helen, if anything happens, take care of Dad. And don't let her decide everything for everyone. She doesn't understand pain, not until she feels it herself." Helen didn't publish the letter. Didn't shout. She simply sent it to Lorraine with a note. "You convinced Mom not to see a doctor. You convinced Dad to sign papers. You convinced the world you were the caring daughter. But I remember everything. And now you will too." Lorraine came to Portland a week later. No husband. No kids. Just jeans and an old jacket. She found Helen at a riverside cafe. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, voice shaking. "We're family." "Family doesn't steal an inheritance from the sister who cared for Dad while you sunbathed in Miami," Helen replied without looking up from her coffee. I just wanted to handle things properly. The house is fine, taxes are paid, I even planted new roses like Mom loved." "Mom loved phlox," Helen said quietly. "You didn't even know that." Lorraine bowed her head. Her shoulders trembled. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was so tired of being second. You were always the perfect daughter. I just wanted to be first, just once." Helen looked at her. For the first time in months, without anger. "You don't earn the first place through deceit, Lorraine. You earn it through care. And you never even asked Dad if he wanted the house to go to you." Silence hung between them like fog over the river. "What do you want now?" Lorraine whispered. "I want you to sell the house. And give half the proceeds to a charity for elderly people left alone like Dad. Like Mom. And you. I'm leaving. Starting over. Without you. Without this house. Without the pain." Lorraine nodded. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them. "I'm sorry, Helen." "Forgiveness isn't my obligation," Helen said. "But I won't stop you from making amends. Just don't come back into my life." 3 months later, the house was sold. Lorraine transferred the money to the charity. She even sent Helen a screenshot of the donation. Helen didn't reply. She moved to Seattle. Found work at a hospice, not as a nurse, but as a volunteer who simply sat with those at life's end. Listened to their stories. Held their hands. She was at peace. Revenge didn't bring back her father. Didn't bring back her mother. Didn't restore her sister. But it gave her back power over her own pain, power to say, "You will not erase me from our story." Sometimes at night, she wondered, what if Lorraine came again? With her kids? With flowers? With a plea for forgiveness? But Helen knew if that day came, she wouldn't slam the door. She'd simply ask, "Tell me, what flowers did Mom love?" And she'd watch to see if Lorraine remembered.